She did not have to stay. That is the thing everyone forgets when they read this story. She was released, told to go, given permission by the woman she loved, by the laws of her people, by every reasonable voice that would have said, "Turn back, you have done enough, no one would blame you." She was a Moabite woman in a world that did not want her, a widow with no children, no land, no future in a foreign country. Every road back to her homeland was open. She closed every single one of them. Her name was Ruth, and the story she stepped into, the one she chose with her whole life, would echo for the rest of time. Before she was loyal, she was loved. Ruth had married into a Hebrew family, a man named Mahlon, the son of Naomi, and Elimelech, who had fled their homeland of Bethlehem to escape a famine. They had come to Moab to survive, and for a season. They did, but grief does not ask permission before it arrives. Elimelech died, then Mahlon, then Chilion, the other son. 3 funerals in a foreign country, 3 women sitting in the dust of the same house, looking at each other across a silence that held everything they could not say. Naomi, Orpah, Ruth, 3 widows, no men, no inheritance, no future that the ancient world could imagine for women in their position. And then Naomi did something remarkable. She heard that the famine in her homeland had broken, that Bethlehem had bread again, and she decided to go home. But before she took another step, she turned to these 2 young women who had followed her out of love, and she told them to leave her. "Go back," she said. "Go back to your mother's homes, find husbands, build lives. You owe me nothing. I can give you nothing. There is no future for you if you follow me." She was not being cruel. She was being honest. And sometimes love sounds like letting go. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and turned back. It was a reasonable choice. It was a human choice. The text does not shame her for it. But Ruth held on. And when Naomi pressed her again, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Go with her." Ruth said something that has never stopped echoing since the moment it was spoken. "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." She was not declaring romantic love. She was declaring covenant. The language she used was the language of the most serious promise a person in the ancient world could make. She was binding herself to Naomi, not because she had to, but because she chose to. She chose a grieving woman with nothing to offer her. She chose a foreign land where she would be an outsider. She chose a God she had watched these people worship, whose faithfulness she had witnessed in the smallest spaces of ordinary life. And she chose it all without a single guarantee of how it would end. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. The timing matters. Everything in this story turns on the timing. Because in a world without safety nets, without social systems, without any structure to catch a poor widow who had nothing, there was one provision woven into Hebrew law, the gleaning laws. The poor were permitted to follow behind the harvesters and gather whatever they missed, the leftovers, the edges of the field, whatever fell from the workers' hands. It was survival. It was legal, and it was humbling in a way that required the surrender of pride simply to eat. Ruth went out to glean. She did not wait for Naomi to find a solution. She did not sit in the house grieving what she had lost. She asked where she could work, and she worked, and the field she happened to choose. The text uses that word, happened, like a quiet wink from the narrator, belonged to a man named Boaz. Boaz was a man of standing in Bethlehem, wealthy, respected, and the text mentions this carefully. A relative of Elimelech, Naomi's dead husband. None of this was an accident. The whole story knows it. Boaz noticed her. He asked his foreman who she was, and the foreman told him the whole story. The Moabite woman, Naomi's daughter-in-law, who had come back with her from Moab, who had asked permission to glean, who had been working since morning, without stopping to rest, and something in Boaz, something deeper than attraction, something that looked like recognition, moved toward her. He went to her directly. "Listen," he said. "Do not go to another field. Stay here. Follow close behind my servant girls. I have told the men not to touch you. When you are thirsty, drink from the water my workers have drawn." Ruth fell to the ground. She had expected nothing. She had been prepared for nothing. And this man, this stranger, was offering protection. She asked the only honest question she had. "Why? Why have I found favor in your eyes? I am a foreigner." And Boaz told her what he knew. "I have heard everything you did," he said. "Everything you left behind. The way you stayed with Naomi after her sons died. The way you came to a people you had never known, under a God you had only begun to know." And he said, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." She had not come asking for reward. She had come asking to survive. And yet here was a man who had seen her the way God sees, not by what she lacked, but by what she had already given. At mealtime, Boaz invited her to eat with his workers. He passed her roasted grain himself, and she ate until she was full. Then she rose and went back to gleaning, and Boaz had quietly instructed the men to leave extra behind for her on purpose. She came home that evening with an ephah of barley, far more than she could have gathered alone. And when Naomi saw it, her face changed. She asked where Ruth had been gleaning. Ruth told her, and Naomi's eyes filled with something that had been absent since she left Bethlehem. "Hope, Boaz," she said quietly. "That man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers." What Ruth did next required courage of a very specific kind. Not the courage of battle, not the courage of public confrontation, the kind of courage that is quieter, more exposed, the courage of asking for something you have earned the right to ask for, but have no guarantee of receiving. Naomi had explained to her the custom of the kinsman redeemer. In Hebrew law, when a man died without children, it was the responsibility of his closest male relative to marry the widow, to preserve the family name and the family land. It was not romantic, it was covenantal, it was justice built into the culture, and Ruth had a legal right to ask, but asking meant uncovering her vulnerability in front of a man whose answer she could not control. Boaz woke in the middle of the night to find a woman lying at his feet. He asked who she was, and Ruth, in the dark, said simply, "I am your servant, Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." It was a proposal, a legal claim, an act of extraordinary courage, wrapped in quiet, deliberate words. And Boaz, this man who had already seen her clearly, already spoken over her with honor, did not turn away. He said, "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This act of loyalty is greater than what you showed before. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor." He honored her in the dark, in the middle of the night, in a moment when he had every social advantage, and she had none. He honored her, but he was honest too. There was another kinsman redeemer closer in line than he was. The law required him to go to that man first. If that man chose to redeem, then the path was his. If not, Boaz would do it. He swore it. He sent her home before dawn with 6 measures of barley in her shawl, so she would not return to Naomi empty-handed. At the city gate, before the elders and the people, Boaz did everything properly. He called the closer kinsman to sit down. He presented the case, the land, the obligation, the widow. The man agreed to redeem the land. Then Boaz said, "On the day you acquire the field from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to restore the name of the dead to his inheritance." The man's face changed. He could not do it, he said. It would jeopardize his own inheritance. He stepped back. He removed his sandal, the ancient legal sign of release, and handed it to Boaz. And Boaz, before all the witnesses, declared, "Today you are witnesses that I have acquired everything that belonged to Elimelech, and his sons from Naomi, and I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the widow, as my wife." The people called out a blessing over Ruth. "May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, the two women who built the house of Israel. They named her among the mothers of the nation, this foreigner, this Moabite widow who had arrived with nothing but her loyalty and her courage."
Ruth bore a son, and the women of Bethlehem brought him to Naomi and placed him in her arms. And they said to her, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer." And his name was Obed. Obed, the servant, the one who would become the father of Jesse. Jesse, the father of David. David, the king from whose line, generations later, would come the one they called the son of David, Ruth the Moabite, the outsider, the widow who chose loyalty over safety. Her name is in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. There is something this story refuses to let us miss. Ruth was not chosen because she was powerful. She was chosen because she was faithful. She had every excuse to go back. Every rational argument pointed toward Moab. She had no promise, no contract, no guarantee that any of this would turn out differently from how it had begun, with loss. She stayed anyway. And God, who does not waste a single act of faithfulness, wove her decision into the very bloodline of redemption. Mordecai asked Esther a question. "Who knows whether you have come to your position for such a time as this?" Ruth did not need the question. She had already answered it with her feet before anyone asked. She turned toward Naomi. She walked into Bethlehem. She went into the field. She lay down at Boaz's feet and asked for what was right. She did the next thing and the next and the next, and every step she took was a step inside a story bigger than she could see. You may be in a season that looks like gleaning, like following behind others, picking up what is left, trying to make something from very little, like standing at a foreign gate hoping someone will see you. Ruth's story does not promise that faithfulness will be comfortable. It promises that faithfulness is never wasted. Where you go, he goes. Where you stay, he stays. And the field he sends you into, he was already there before you arrived. If Ruth's story moves something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments below, tell us, is there a time in your own life when you chose to stay when every voice told you to go? We would love to hear from you. If you are new here, welcome to Echoes of Eternity. Every week we bring you a story from Scripture told the way it deserves to be told, with honesty, with depth, and with the full weight of its humanity. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and we will see you next week.